I have been a fan of LEGO Ninjago for well over half of my entire lifespan. I've been around this fandom since the pilot episodes aired in January of 2011. That's a long time to be invested in a children's cartoon. I've seen the release of every piece of Ninjago media since its humble conception. The good, the bad, and the weirdly sexist. I've watched all of this show as it came out, except for the brief period of trash fire in 2014 that was rebooted, which made 9-year-old me piss my pants in anger and hang up the towel for a few years. Which is completely understandable if you're also a Ninjago fan, because you likely know exactly what from that season I'm talking about. My point in saying all of this is I feel uniquely qualified to talk about the evolution and progression of Ninjago because I've been around for a while. Long enough to have personally seen everything as it changed firsthand. And I don't mean in a normal sense of attachment that most small children have to their favorite shows. No, I was obsessively invested in this show and the fandom surrounding it. The second I got my little hands on a device that could connect to the internet, I was online defending the legitimacy of my favorite ship. And, spectating the fandom as a whole. And I have to say, the atmosphere of this fandom has seriously changed from when I was a kid. People are really divisive now. Well, no, okay, that's always been the case. But back when I was younger, the internet side of the fandom was where all the weird kids came together like a Game of Thrones council meeting. But now it seems as if there's been a breach at the ice wall. Thanks to the pandemic, fandom spaces net-wide have been invaded by waves of people who have no business being in fandom. The problem with that is that those normal people still haven't left, and they have zero fandom etiquette. And now they've taken to places like TikTok to whine and complain about their beloved childhood show being ruined by the idea of their favorite ninja taking it up the ass. Well, I hate to break it to you, random unemployed high school boy, but Ninjago characters getting absolutely piped was a thing long before the show made it a vaguely canon possibility. And let's be honest, these people don't actually care about the show or its characters in any capacity. They stopped caring as soon as they hit 13, and liking ninjas became gay. What they care about is seeing something nostalgic for them change, even though it's not for them anymore, and they don't even watch the new stuff. It's a classic case of, I don't care about that toy anymore until someone else has it, and then I want it again. As annoying as pseudo-Ninjago fans can be, people genuinely within the circle of the fandom are just as bad a lot of the time now. The idea of differing opinions seems to give people heart palpitations, and everything is eternally an argument. There's a new drama every 2 weeks that I don't particularly care to keep myself caught up on, because I have a casserole in the oven I have to go get. Hi, I'm Corbian. If you haven't seen my channel before, I make content focused mainly on LEGO Ninjago. The Hell of a Boss lyric video up on my page is just to farm views off of the dumbest fandom on this platform. And if you have seen my videos, I know it's been 2 years since I uploaded anything. I'm sorry, but I was a bit busy. I had to go to college and then drop out of it. I now have an associate's degree, but I fear I may never be able to afford eggs again. The intro to this video was just a long-winded way for me to say that I'm in the mood to complain, which is something us Ninjago fans are exceptionally good at doing. And there was a key turning point for this. You see, back in 2018, Sons of Garmadon was released. Visually, it was unlike anything the show had given us before, and Ninjago seemed to change considerably in direction and tone during this time, and so did the fandom, because people were pissed. Not too much about the changes in visuals or storytelling, because you'd have to be a moron to call what we were getting before better in that category. No, people were mad at the redesigns. But why? Well, partially nostalgia blindness, change bad, the same thing over and over good, that sort of thing. But there was another reason. One I find considerably more understandable. This was not the first time we'd seen these designs. They were originally made for the LEGO Ninjago movie, which was received just so well by the fans. When Ninjago fans back in ancient 2017 heard we'd be getting, for some reason, a major motion picture in the style of the LEGO movie for our little Cartoon Network show, we were ecstatic. A well-received movie meant more fans and more merchandise, greatly increasing our chances for higher quality content in the future. And, our fan base getting its own film like this was just exciting. But then the previews and trailers came out, and we all began collectively scratching our heads. This looked nothing like the show. These looked nothing like the characters. Are they in high school? People were immediately put off, because it seemed like this was not a film that had anything to do with the actual TV show. It just used the same characters. Or claimed to. I would argue that none of the people in this thing are the same as their show counterparts. Despite the glaring red flags, though, Ninjago fans decided to give it a chance anyway, and it was like a slap in the face. These were not the ninja we knew, but gross facsimiles devoid of any actual merit. See, Ninjago was not a well-known fanbase like, say, Batman, which meant that many of the people going to see this movie wouldn't have much of an idea of who these characters were. Obviously, 7 seasons of lore could not realistically be shoved into a 90-minute film. That, paired with the fact that the movie spent 4 years in development hell, meant it could not take place between the newest season, Hands of Time, and whatever would come next. So the producers needed to get creative and diverge from the canon. In doing so, they opted to make the ninja easier to understand for the unfamiliar audience by boiling them down to their key traits, and more relatable by putting them in a setting more familiar to kids: school. This made them more easily digestible in a short time frame, and it was not a bad idea in concept. Except they got it wrong. To understand how, we first need to look back at the show itself, specifically the core set of characters from the older seasons: Wu, Garmadon, and Lloyd, and then the others: Kai, Nia, Jay, Cole, and Zane. All 8 of them are complex, well-thought-out characters that have had years of careful development and arcs. But let's try to break them down to some core tropes. The movie was announced in 2013, meaning that those writing it initially had 2 seasons and the pilot episodes to draw from for characterization. Obviously, there wasn't nearly as much to work with back then as there is now, but the simplicity of these older seasons came with a great advantage. The ninja were much more one-dimensional, and their basic tropes were easier to pick up on. Lloyd was the hesitant protagonist. He was more than willing to step up to protect Ninjago, but he struggled with the idea of being up against his own father, and not getting to do normal kid things anymore. Cole was the strategic leader. He kept the other ninja in check, and was known to be extremely uptight. He was perpetually serious, and more on the quiet, observant side. He was very adamant on responsibility, and not letting Ninjago down. Kai was the hothead. He often acted impulsively, and without much regard for the results or the safety of the group. His anger and desire to be a hero often controlled how he reacted to things, and made him a fan favorite. Nia was the independent one. She regularly tried to help the group, and when she was repeatedly turned down, she decided to become a hero in her own way. She was very focused on finding who she wanted to be and how she could help. Jay was the energetic loudmouth. He never stopped talking, and was the first one to complain or freak out when things went poorly. He often argued with the others or bragged about his skills. Zane was the quiet and mysterious type. He was intelligent, observant, and didn't really understand the group's humor or behaviors. He was by far the strangest member of the team at the beginning of the show, regularly referred to as weird or different. Wu and Garmadon were opposites of each other. Wu was wise and benevolent, training the ninja with a strict discipline. He was mysterious and often borderline cryptic with his teachings. Garmadon was maniacal and evil, serving as one of the main villains in both the pilot episodes and the 2nd season. His only true goodness came from his love for his son and his wife. He and Wu were meant to balance each other out in the early seasons, but it was also proven multiple times that Garmadon had the capacity for good. These tropes were simple, but effective. They made the Ninjago characters easy for kids to relate to, and that was good stuff for a movie adaptation. So boiling them down to just these traits shouldn't have been a problem for the movie. It's an easy task, especially because there were people who worked on the show that worked on the movie. So they could do it, right? Right? Oh my god. Now, to give the movie credit, the directions they took with Wu, Lloyd, and Garmadon worked very well. These 3 set the tone for the movie beautifully. The only problem being, clearly most of the thought went into these 3, and the film sort of became the Lloyd Garmadon movie while the rest of the characters got crumbs. Putting most of the focus on Lloyd would have been fine, that's what made the most sense to do. The other ninja could have worked just as fine as supporting characters with less fleshed out dynamics, if they had been boiled down to the correct tropes, or even ones that felt enjoyable for their characters. The writers certainly did pull personality traits from the show counterparts to cement what they would be in the movie, but they did not pull from what was actually essential to the character. Put simply, they picked the wrong fruit. Minor aspects of what their character was in the show became their entire personality for the movie. Cole's more quiet nature was drawn upon to make him a stoner type who loves music and says basically nothing. Kai's confident nature was taken and amped up tenfold. He becomes this energetic and goofy jock type that feels very off and disingenuous. If you want to see how they handled Nia in the movie, let's just take a look at what the wiki has to say about her. Oh, interesting. It's only 2 sentences. This is because they forgot to give her a personality. But the biggest atrocities of characterization in this movie are Jay and Zane. Their interpretations are so bad that I quite literally hit the Evangelion Shinji pose in the theater every time one of them spoke. Jay's awkward nature was taken to make him a shy, fragile, insecure type. While Jay couldn't shut up about how great he is, this Jay rarely ever speaks a word unless he's announcing he's about to throw up or agreeing that he pisses his pants. And then there's Zane. In the show, Zane was a character that showcased the humanity in the mechanical, at least in the earlier seasons. In the movie, they forgot about the humanity part. Zane's entire role in this movie is that he's a robot and it's funny. There is nothing else to him. He is a robot pretending to be a normal teenager by regurgitating whatever buzzwords and memes were relevant at the time, and it's meant to be funny.
I'm digging that funky tune Despacito. Dab me outside.
Suck my dick!
It gets annoying fast. Now, obviously, a lot of Ninjago fans were very annoyed about this because it really just wasn't what we were hoping for, and the problems didn't end with just the characterization. The movie itself, despite being in development for so long, felt incredibly rushed. Clips of animation were reused several times. The dialogue had audio editing that often felt questionable and slapped together. The other ninja barely got any sort of attention, and how they all came together was never really explained. Most of their time in the movie is spent hating Lloyd. They don't feel like a friend group, they feel like a group of teenagers whose parents forced them to go outside and hang out. There's no spinjitzu in this movie. There are no golden weapons. Elemental powers don't show up until the very last moment. The plot feels like it's duct taped together. The random live-action scenes add nothing and do not need to be there. And I'm not saying that this movie needs to be a carbon copy of what early Ninjago was. Reimagining characters in new situations is fine. I'm a Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan. Unique interpretations of characters is not something I'm against. But it has to be done correctly and fit within the context of the new situation. And the bag was absolutely fumbled here. Ninjago fans were not impressed with what we were given. And apparently, neither was the general audience. Sure, the movie had good humor and 1 or 2 solid emotional moments, but that's not impressive on its own. Every LEGO movie has that. They're not breaking any new ground here. And if TMNT 2007 has taught me anything, it's that those 2 things alone do not make a movie good. A polished turd sandwich is still full of shit. Now, outside of trying to be an adaptation of Ninjago, which it fails at, this movie is not terrible. I do enjoy rewatching it. There are some moments that I really like, and this is my favorite version of Garmadon. I do think people can be a bit too harsh on this movie. However, I think being critical of it is entirely fair, especially because this was something we were promised in 2013 and didn't get until 2017. But whatever. Ninjago fans got a movie in 2017, it wasn't very good, everyone wiped their hands of it and moved on. Except, a short clip of Season 8 was leaked, and people saw that Lloyd had gotten a redesign. And he looked like his movie counterpart. Ninjago fans lost their goddamn minds. Some people were worried that the show would now follow the movie's continuity. Others were just mad that the designs had been changed. Others still thought that a design change simply marked the beginning of a new, better, and more mature era of Ninjago. Something of higher quality for more people to enjoy. And thus, the Ninjago fandom fell into a cesspool of arguing and uncertainty. But then we got Sons of Garmadon, one of Ninjago's best and most beloved seasons, and everyone calmed down a little bit. The blow of the redesigns was definitely softened by how fantastic this season and the next 2, Hunted and March of the Oni, were. And while there are still Ninjago fans out there that argue new designs bad, old ones good, they're a much quieter crowd that has mostly died out at this point. However, over the years I've noticed little changes in some of the characters that came along with the new designs, which I believe might be in part because of the movie, subconsciously or not. For years now, Ninjago fans have been pointing out that Jay seems much more soft and whiny than he did before. Yes, in the early seasons he was known to complain, but in the later ones he becomes downright childish and ridiculous at times. He's a massive toddler. He's completely spineless. And he and Nia's once honestly really sweet relationship kind of changed to be a lot more bland. Jay was a flawed guy in the early seasons, but Nia liked him despite that. And whether or not you liked the arc their relationship had from Rebooted to Skybound, you have to admit that it did add a lot of depth to what they were to each other. And when they worked to understand each other better, they really did a lot together. But in seasons 8 and beyond, they kind of begin to slip into this really annoying, overplayed, and boring trope of girl boss ex-dotting male wife. And Zane seems more robotic than ever. The writers seem to have forgotten what to do with him for a while, and what his key values are. While he did say and do things to make it obvious he was a robot in earlier Ninjago, now making it obvious is his entire character. Everything he says has to be inhuman in some way. He's one step away from looking into the camera and flat out saying, "I am a robot." I was tired of it years ago, and it's not any more endearing now. For the love of God, just let him be a person. Kai is another one that the writers just don't seem to know what to do with. Within the later half of the show, he spends most of his time complaining or just being arbitrary to the goal, which is annoying to see because he was the show's original main character. And from Sons of Garmadon to Crystallize, he's the blandest and least interesting one to me. Now, can all of this entirely be blamed on the movie? No, of course not. But the problems I have with the characterization start at the same time the redesigns are introduced. And the movie's story of Lloyd trying to connect with his father is carried over into seasons 8, 9, and 10. So I genuinely believe that some of what the movie was trying to do was carried over into the show. And obviously, the show pulls it off way better. The Oni trilogy is held in very high regard as the best Ninjago has to offer. So I think the movie did do some good for us there. But the idea that the show worked off of what the movie was trying to do is also not something I'm entirely just assuming here. Multiple sources have said that the movie had a significant impact on the production of Sons of Garmadon, and of course, the redesigns were part of that, but not all. Production is much more than how the characters look. And the season was written by the Hageman brothers, who also adapted and wrote the movie. Stating that the movie has impacted the show is not an outlandish claim to make. It's a reasonable and observable one. Now, the Hageman brothers stopped writing for the show after season 10. But they had been on the show for so long that they'd absolutely set the framework for what it was. And a lot of the problems with the characters, in my opinion, are simply the writers not exactly knowing what to do with the way things had been set up. And with seasons 8 through 10 being influenced by the movie, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that a similar situation with the movie happened again, but within the show. The Hageman brothers tried to boil down the show characters into easier tropes and fit them into what the movie was going to be, which didn't really work. And once they left the show, the new writers tried to figure out what they were doing with the characters and what they were supposed to be. But they got it a little wrong. They're still getting it a little wrong, in some cases. And in doing so, they made mistakes similar to the movie itself, which is pretty ironic. Now, obviously, characters do not stay the same forever, and writers changing things here and there when the show is passed around to other people is not an uncommon thing. But it's especially annoying in Ninjago, a show that's been going on for so long, because they should have these characters figured out by now. These changes do not feel like character developments, because that's not really what they're trying to be. The ninja were changing because no one was really quite sure what to do with them at times. Cole's developments in the Oni trilogy and Master of the Mountain were deliberate. That's character development. But Jay's complaining, slowly becoming more and more whiny and childish as he's passed around like a blunt to new writers, that's not development, that's a regression. And it's an indication that the writers aren't exactly solid on what these characters were before the movie. Because before the movie was Ninjago's more childish era. They have to draw from Sons of Garmadon and beyond. They have to build up. Sometimes Ninjago is a show that honestly feels like it forgets its past. Sure, old characters come back and make an appearance, but that sometimes feels performative. The show, despite the Oni trilogy and the masterpiece that was Seabound, was clearly running out of steam. Partially because after so many seasons of the same characters, nobody was really sure what to do with them anymore. And after the sad whimper of a finale that was crystallized, I figured that was that. The characters had been boiled down and tossed around so much because of the movie and the changes in the writer's room, that there was nowhere else to go. So it crashed and burned at the finish line, and that was the end of the original series. I truly believe Ninjago could have been different if the movie had not existed. Redesigns would have been fine, that's not what I'm upset about. I do really think that the movie played a massive role in characterization getting lost in translation and setting future ideas up for failure. But then again, without the movie, we may not have the version of the Oni trilogy that we got. So do the pros outweigh the cons? I'm honestly not sure. I just think it's interesting to look back at Ninjago's history and timeline and try to figure out why things ended up the way they did. It's fun to look back. And though I complained a lot in this video, Ninjago has been and always will be my favorite franchise out there. Every autistic elementary schooler picks something to center their whole life around like they're picking their college major, and little old me picked Ninjago. I'm very invested in this show and how it's changed over the years, and I make this video not out of malice, but out of curiosity and love. This show may be rough around the edges, but goddammit, I'm gonna keep sticking with it until the franchise inevitably dies. Dragon's Rising has been a breath of fresh air that this franchise desperately needed so far, and while I think they still have some things to figure out in that writer's room, like how to fucking handle Zane, things are looking extremely promising. As of writing this script, the third season is set to premiere in 2 days, and I'm hoping it continues to meet my expectations. I guess we'll see.
Whoops, you have to put the Brickster stick in your mouth.
If you watched this far into the video, then shout out to you because I am very late here. Again, it's been 2 years since my last video, and this channel has been sitting vacant for way too long. In fairness, I had a lot going on. But I do like YouTube, and I figure it's time to make my return to it, because I think I have some better tools, and I just have things more figured out now, and I can make better videos. Because of my absence, I don't really expect this video to do too well, so if you'd like to subscribe and catch my future stuff, I'd really appreciate it. All in all, this video is sort of just me going through my observations that I've made over the years as I've watched the show develop. My videos are informative, but they are also my opinion, so they're not really objective facts and shouldn't be taken that way. This is just how I interpreted what was going on and me speculating. It's just interesting to me to try to connect things around. Do let me know what your thoughts on all of this are in the comments, and whether or not you feel that the movie did truly affect the show like I believe it did. I unironically do read through each and every comment I get, because the Ninjago fandom is a very wide spectrum, and I like to see what other people think of the show and what's going on in it. Any ideas as to what you'd like to see me talk about next are also welcomed, as I'm just getting back into the saddle, and knowing what people would be interested in seeing would be very helpful. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Take care.